Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 40 of This Valorant Life. In this episode, Adam and I are going to be diving into the different agents. And specifically within each agent type, we know what they are: duelist, sentinel, initiator, and controller. But even within those classes, there's differences in terms of play type and what those agents are good at. And so we want to dive into those, talk about what those classes within subclasses within those classes are, and then as players how to think about which one or which way you should lean one way or the other depending on your own play style. And so with that, Adam, why don't we start off with initiators? That's kind of where we ended our conversation just now. What would be the two kind of classes of initiators in your mind?
So you have recon initiators and you have flash initiators. In terms of like your play style, the way that kind of falls into place is if you're an initiator player to start with, you like to have a little bit of control over fights. You like to have control over the situations. You're aware of your mini map. That's probably a big one. And you're aware of your teammates' positioning. So another thing that's really useful for initiator players is being very vocal because your util starts the map control. So as long as you have those key characteristics, you're going to really thrive on initiator, in my opinion. I think because I'm very vocal when I play my games, initiator really slots in well for me. So I've had a lot of experience playing flash initiator, recon initiator, and a little bit of duelist. But in a team setting, I do think I do the best on initiator. To maybe expand on that a little bit, if you like to be a little bit more hands-on in the action, you're going to find a little bit more enjoyment, I think, out of flash initiator, just because if you flash, you can also flash for yourself and for your teammates, so you can kind of be right directly next to the action. Whereas recon initiators, you can kind of throw your util and just be a little bit further away from the action. If you think about a Sova dart lineup or something, you can throw your dart across the map. You don't really need to be there. So generally, your recon initiator is going to be a more controlled, slower paced play style. Maybe you're in drone or something while you're watching your teammates fight. Whereas flash initiator, much more hands-on.
So flash initiator would be more Sky, KO definitely, and Gecko, right? And then scan would be Sova, Fade, and
I think that's their only two scans, actually.
So Sova and Fade, really. So that's initiator. What about controller? What are the subclasses you feel like exist within controller?
The main one I will say is you're either with the team or you're away from the team. So you have the lurker type of controllers, so Astra, Viper, Omen to some extent. Yeah. And then you have go with the team. So you have Clove, you have Brimstone, Harbor, and again, Omen to some extent. So
Omen's kind of
like a nice middle ground. So in terms of personality types or playstyle types that really fits into these, in my opinion, controllers, I find the best controllers are the ones that don't actually talk that much, but really like to be on their own. And the ones that lurk really well understand map control and timings really well. So they're very like macro-oriented player. Whereas with the Clove and the Brimstone and Omen to some extent, those players that really thrive in those roles, I think, have a more hint of duelist in them where they just really like to take gun duels. They're really good at trading and they thrive in more chaotic situations. So in that case, it's kind of strange because like controller has like, they're literally on the both ends of the spectrum. You're literally either not in the chaos at all or you do thrive in the chaos. And you're maybe just, you like to have like more straightforward utility compared to a duelist, or you like to be second or third in on an execute. So I guess something that comes to mind for me is like Demon 1 is a great duelist player, but he doesn't actually like to go in first. So back when EG was playing, Jogmo would go in first a lot of the time. And then Demon 1 would kind of go in second. Or if they put him on smokes as well, and he was really good second in. The other thing that you need to know for controller players specifically, and I actually skipped over this on recon, but if you like to be in the clutch, and you're a clutch type of player, controllers and recon initiators are going to be last alive the most often, just because they have the best util to close out a round.
When you think of a controller that works versus a controller that's with the team, um, in just in terms of their ability to affect the game, do you think that sometimes the lurk is a little less effective? I'm just saying that because if you're on attack, you tend to be in a lurk role and your team's getting rolled, then the lurk really doesn't do anything, right? The lurk is there to keep teams honest, but if they're rolling you, then it doesn't matter. I feel like whereas the playing with the team at that point, at least you're helping not get rolled, or maybe there's nothing you can do about it. But I'm just thinking about it in that context, like that active versus passive that we always talk about. It sounds to me like lurk is really powerful, but it's fundamentally a little more passive.
I think you're right. Speaking from my own experience when I was learning the role, I found that I had a lot more impact when I was with the team and having that, being more hands-on and having those gun duels. But what was kind of lacking in my gameplay was the lurking. So after I kind of like did a little bit of both, instead of just being like all my eggs in one basket on with the team, kind of just sprinkle in a few lurks, it worked really well. And because I have confidence of being in the gunfight so many times, when I would go for lurks, I would be pretty confident and just take the duel and just try to win them. Whereas like if you are playing very lurky and playing very slow, you kind of cool down a little bit in the game. You might be looking at the mini map a little bit too much. You might be thinking about how to outplay the enemy team too much on timings, and reading the enemy in ranked is kind of obvious in some games and also kind of not. So it's like a little bit of 50-50 there. So I guess short answer, yes, I do think with the team controllers generally get more impact, but you do need to have a little bit of both, because on the same note, if you always lurk, you're not going to have that much impact. So you also need to be sprinkling in being with the team sometimes.
That's much more of the context for a controller on attack. On defense, does that naming or that subclass switch at all? Is it, instead of with the team, is it fast rotate, and then the ones that lurk tend to play more anchor?
I do believe so. So if you go back to your Astra Viper, they do tend to be heavy bomb site anchors, because they have global util. They can kind of just activate it anywhere. So on a map like Binds, they're going to be seen on the extremities towards showers or be long. Whereas if you're looking at a Brimstone or a Clove, they're going to be more closer to like a U-Haul, a Hookah, or even just spawn rotate. So because of that, actually when I first started learning controller, because I didn't really understand the positioning piece, I found way more success playing Astra and Viper. And then after I kind of understood the positioning piece a little bit more, I switched to Omen, and that's when I finally hit Radiant, because it kind of was able to blend the two for me. But I think that is the normal, I guess, archetype, is like the anchor lurking controllers tend to be slower played. They might just not over rotate, and then your Clove and your Brimstone will just run around the map.
Well, that's maybe a good segue, because on the Sentinel role, they'll often play like a lurk anchor role too. So how do you separate the two in your mind? How would you choose, if you're naturally leaning towards that lurk controller role, how would you delineate that between that and leaning towards the lurk Sentinel role?
So lurk controllers and lurk Sentinels are very, very similar. You will oftentimes see players be able to flex between the two. But the difference is one has a little bit more freedom on attack and one has a little bit more freedom on defense. So if you can kind of choose based on which half you like more. For example, Sentinels on attack have a lot of freedom. Your teammates don't really expect too much out of you aside from holding flank. Whereas like on attack as a controller, you need to make sure your smokes are there. But if you're on defense, you just smoke on the rotate or whatever, but your Sentinel's sight hold setups are pretty important. So that's kind of where I think that, I guess, has that fork in the road. But you could definitely mix and match some of those play styles. So I don't know if it's very crucial for you to specialize if you are a lurking type of controller or a lurking type of Sentinel. You just have to pick whichever half you like a little bit more, I think.
In your mind, what do you think are the subclasses in Sentinel then?
So I don't know if it's like the best agent choice wise, but like in terms of playstyle, you have like the fast rotate, very hyper aggressive, rotating a lot, using info util, and then you have like the I'm gonna sit on my bomb site, you come to
Yeah.
me, I'm gonna ace you type of playstyle. Or I guess you just play retake. So I guess in that case, there's kind of like three. So like if I think about FNS or John QT in pro play, they'll put like their whole setup somewhere and they'll just play retake. Hopefully they get a few kills off of kill trap or spam or something like that, but they won't play for the site to die. And then you look at a player like Benji Fishy or Sagetsu, and they come to your site in Alpha Hair. You go to their site, they're gonna fight you, and they're gonna hopefully hold down the site. So that's a huge playstyle difference
With the same agents.
With the same agents, yeah. So I think although there are the subclasses in Sentinel, like for example, you have the Cypher and Killjoy that has really good flank protection compared to Deadlock, Sage, and Vice in Chamber. Like there's that natural sub selection. It's just that currently we don't really see the other Sentinels being as viable. So the playstyle difference is more so in the not the agent pick, but in your
play style that you would choose. Would you say then that play style decision is more driven by your internal game confidence in terms of gunfights?
I think that's definitely one of the biggest factors. Probably the number one biggest factor. I will say another thing too is just the way people understand the game. Because sometimes people might think, well, if I'm solo on a site and all my other teammates on the other side of the map, I should probably play retake. And that is mostly true a lot of the time. But if you're really confident in your setup, or if you think that if you give up the site for retaking, you're just going to lose the post plant, maybe due to ultimates or just the guns, you might play on site for a kill or two and just trust your teammates and hope they win the 4v4. Or if you get two and die, that would be good too. So some people view the game in a perfect chess move situation, and they will always play for the default textbook play. And I think that's not really appreciating the individual performance of your play, but also respecting the opponents too much. So Valorant's a lot more dynamic than that. And I do find out of all of the player types, Sentinels and controllers tend to go for the textbook playstyle a little bit more.
Okay. In your mind, you were kind of telling me before we got on the call around how you suggested to Zasco to switch from Jet to Sentinel. What was the decision making, or what was the reasoning that guided you to that recommendation for him?
Duelist players, like to be a really strong duelist player, you need to kind of have like this brain off moment where you're just playing straight up for intuition. You're in the chaos, you're kind of popping off, you're not overthinking your plays, and you're really mechanically gifted. Zasco is mechanically gifted, but he was making decisions time and time again that didn't really add up to a duelist playstyle. Like he would sometimes you would catch him lurking on duelists away from the team. Sometimes you would catch him not really dashing in when there was a pocket of timing there, and capitalizing off of stuff. So duelist players that can kind of like really, I guess, try to take space and create opportunity will do really well. And of course you need the mechanical skill to back that. But in Zasco's case, his mechanics are very, very strong. But he wasn't able to fully take over a game, which I think when you switch to Sentinel, you will be able to fully take over a game because you can have extremely strong site setups compared to just Jet. You get one, you dash out. If you're playing Sentinel, you can kind of play around your bomb site. You have like your little tools, and you can more consistently, hold down your bomb site, try to get 2 or 3. And then on top of that, because he was kind of in those lurk positions on attack already, you can kind of do the exact same thing on like duelists don't have any tools to lurk better than Sentinel players, but Sentinel players have better tools to lurk. So it kind of just was like a no-brainer after. And it's not to say that you can't learn a role. We did try to learn the role, and he did go from Diamond 3 to Immortal 1 pretty quickly after we kind of touched on those points. But you can see it wasn't natural for him. And there was like those things that kept occurring, like you're not activating your dash here. You could have, smoke dashed out here to make space for your teammate. There's an opportunity here. And it kind of just kept occurring that he wasn't doing that. So leaning into your strengths, I think, was a good recommendation for him.
So what I'm hearing is part of this is noticing what your natural play style leans you towards, and then understanding which type of agent might benefit from that more. So in this case, what I'm hearing is Jet and his playstyle with Jet just wasn't working out. But then he could use that mechanical playstyle with a Cypher or with a KJ to be able to capitalize on his gunfight skill without needing to create in himself this duelist mentality that maybe just wasn't there naturally.
And I guess something I want to add to that too is some players are very like dry fight heavy, and some players are very good at fighting with utility. Sentinels, unironically, actually take a lot of fights dry, because if you think about Cypher, a lot of your trips will get shock darted. So if they run onto your bomb site, all you have is really your cage. And he was really good at taking dry fights, but it was kind of like understanding what fight you're going to take and looking for those windows of opportunity.
What do you think makes someone, and this will segue into our next discussion around duelists, what makes someone good at taking dry fights versus util fights?
I think there's like some type of like mental readiness to winning dry duels. And I think, of course, reaction time plays a little bit of part. I'm sure, your aim and your crosshair placement comes into it as well. But to me, it seems to be like a level of focus that some of these players have that just wins more dry duels. And it does kind of go in terms of a scale. Like if you were to put me in, say, a diamond lobby, I'm going to win a lot of dry duels. I could probably pick those agents. But in the current skill set that I'm at, I'm not going to win that many dry duels. And I do prefer to use util to try to get an advantage. And I think I'm really good at that. But the dry duel part, I'm going to lose like 10 out of 10 dry duels to Demon 1 probably. Because that's actually his strength. He will just face tank the sight hit, and then he will activate dash, and he's going to kill the 1, maybe 2, and then he's going to dash away, and he's going to go in for more. And that's definitely his strength. But it's definitely not mine. So,
what makes you think, do well in util duels?
I think I see more opportunity times. Like I can look at the mini map and see my teammate get contact and use util and fight off of them, or I can see this opportunity. Oh, this guy's in this kind of like close range here, where if I use util, I can set up that fight. Like I'm really good at seeing something to set up the fight for an advantageous duel. Whether it be teammates contact, whether it be just a random timing peak, or whether it be util in my kit. Whereas I think the players that take the, I guess, dry duel just a straight on angle, they might not have that awareness, which they could, but that's not their strength. Their strength is like, oh, I'm really comfortable on this angle, I'm going to take it. And it's interesting because I think I've tried to force that development on that skill, and it improves, but it's definitely not the natural thing for me.
Well, and that leads us into the discussion just around the duelist subclasses. So there's the dry fight versus util fight. We've kind of already just talked about that. What about dive versus secondary duelist?
Dive versus secondary. So let's kind of list the agents really quickly. Dive duelist, you have Jet, you have Raze, you have Neon, and to some extent Yoru. And then secondary duelist is much more prominent in ranked. You don't really see secondary duelists in team play. But you're looking at your Reyna, you're looking at your Phoenix, your Yoru to some extent, and your ISO. I might be missing one. But with dive duelists specifically, your job is to make space on the execute and get past the choke point, and hopefully punish players that are on the site if you have a lot of initiator util. You have to be pretty fearless. Again, you have to thrive in the chaos pretty well, and you're just getting in there. And then the secondary in duelist, you have to be really good at trading, and I guess you have to make sure your spacing and your routing makes sense given to where your duelist is going and where where the enemy players are. So I don't know if there's specifically a good archetype for this in terms of personalities, but I will say you definitely notice some players thrive more in the dive duelist role compared to secondary in, and you see some players thrive a lot more in second in compared to dive duelist. And again, Demon 1 being an example of that. He's much better being second in instead of diving in, even though he played Jet. Sometimes he actually wasn't first in.
Effectively, the idea of dive duelist versus secondary duelist, does it not almost boil down to movement versus non-movement duelist?
Yeah, I believe so.
So the movement duelists are really to create space and dive. and then the secondary duelists. That really only works on maps where the taking of the space is not as important. So just Icebox, really, where like Reyna and ISO would be decent picks.
Mm-hmm.
Like talking about meta.
Right. I guess that also brings me to the point of Fnatic's Haven comp, though, because they play a double duelist comp. They
On
play ISO on
okay.
Haven, ISO Yoru, and those are not really your traditional dive duelist. Like they could have easily picked like a
Mm-hmm.
Neon to fit the comp, but they play Yoru ISO to leverage their strong mechanical
Mm-hmm.
players. And I think if you have a lot of strong mechanical players, you don't want to force them to just feed them into
Mm-hmm.
the wolves sometimes. So sometimes just playing the secondary duelist or second end can be good for you in ranked if you have really good mechanical skill. That's why like a Smurf Reyna will have more impact than say a Smurf Jet. That's also due to the heal and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But that role is inherently more baity than your dive duelist.
Why? How would you counsel a player to go one way or the other in terms of if they're already playing duelists? How would you help them choose between that dry fight versus util fight duelist, so a raise versus a jet, and how would they choose between the dive and secondary duelist?
So let's start with the util versus the dry. I think you kind of just can tell if someone's really good at angle holding, they're probably better on a dry duelist because oftentimes you'll be holding off angles and stuff. Um, I'm not very good at angle holding at all, so I like to prep
What do
my
you mean
duels
you are
with
not good
util.
at angle holding at all?
If someone walks into me, I'm not gonna win that duel. If someone peeks into me and I'm holding an angle, I'm probably not gonna win the duel. Like I have my moments, but if that's not my default
Okay.
setting at all, like I like to be the person that is peeking into someone that's holding rather than someone peeking into
Is
me.
the reverse true for certain players?
100%, yeah. I've coached a lot of players. Asco is one of them. They're lethal on the angle holds, like insane. I try to replicate it, and it's just like it's no
What about
go.
it? Is it just like is it like crosshair placement, quick timing, and just focus?
I want to say yes. I believe so. I think there's like another some other stuff that goes into it, but like it's not like an aim thing because I spend a lot of times in aim trainers. At least I used to, and my aim training scores is probably better than a large majority of the player base, even in the Radiant games, just because they don't really aim training is not that popular in amongst like already good players. Um, so it's not an aim thing. It's not a raw aim thing. At least I think it's like the other side of your mechanics, maybe understanding the angle better, maybe that focus, maybe the crosshair placement. Primi is a very, very good angle holder. I think he was the first one that I saw that kind of inspired me to work on it a little bit more.
In terms
Um,
of, as in just on a one tap basis.
yeah, they swing and then they insta die. Primi's latest montage, at least the one I saw, I think it was posted yesterday. There's a lot of cases to where there's this pattern that happens in the game where you'll peek out and you're in a gun duel, and then the enemy player also peeks out, but then they'll tuck back into cover, and then they're about ready to swing you. So you know they're there, they know you're there, but they're about to go for the reswing, and Premier will always one tap them on the reswing. Whereas if I'm in his shoes, if this player untucks, I like to go a little bit wider to like push into him a little bit. Like I like to push the narrative because I like to peek. But he'll actually sometimes take steps back or like go into a deeper angle, so they have to deep peek into him more committed. So all of that to say, people definitely have their preferences on whether or not they like to peek angles or to angle hold. And if you like to angle hold, your dry duel type of play style will be a lot stronger, especially on defense. And if you're very util oriented, like you like to have something to lead your fight, you don't like to take dry duels, looking at a raise or a neon will be a very good play style for you. At least it has been for me.
That's so interesting on the angle hold question because I would think it is just purely mechanics, but there's something else there. Do you think there's anything to do with that around just focus? There's been videos on Kankang around how he shakes his mouse every now and then, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's partly to just keep his focus there. Do you think there's any utility in doing that for players?
I think so. I forget the video I saw, but it's like something after holding an angle for like 5 or 7 seconds, your reaction time dramatically worsens. Um, and I remember Stewie 2K is something he used to do in CS as well. So I definitely think there's something that is good to kind of refresh yourself.
Some players do the crouch
sometimes
thing
you'll
too.
see, yeah, they'll crouch. Other players will like untuck and then
Yeah.
peek back out. But there's definitely some type of level of focus, I think, that helps with
We're
that.
kind of refreshing your focus. So what do you do?
I like to untuck and then peek back out, or I'll just hold an off angle. Because I really don't like to hold on angles. I'll just hold an off angle. If they walk into me, I'll kill them. But if I'm holding an off angle and they peek into me and they're like really ready, I'll probably lose the fight. Which is why Xander is really good at this. Every time I played against him, he's destroyed me on any off angle I've held, because he just like walks around the map and he just like crouch peeks you and he's so ready. And I learned anytime I play against Xander to not actually hold any angle at all and just to util everything. Like if my teammate gets contact, then I'll swing, but I'm actually not going to just take a dry duel. I won't give it to him. But if I'm playing against like any other player that's not so thorough, then I could probably get away with it.
Do you think that is just, there's mechanical skill, right? Which is just, or maybe mechanical potential, let's say, is just in one gunfight or one moment, how skilled or what level you could display. I wonder with pros that they're just used to playing at a really high level all the time, and that they're able to play much closer to their mechanical and skill level potential than other players are for longer periods of time, just because they've been doing it as pros and in scrims.
Probably like their stamina is a lot higher for something like that. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, because even if you look at players like Crowell Cells, and on his stream he's been playing like a lot of ranked recently, he does not get lazy ever on his angle clearing, and I think that's why he's so consistent, at least in ranked. In pro play, I think his consistency is probably due to other factors. But
so what's the best role you should do to rank up then?
there's actually an answer for this for the lower ranks. So if you're in the low elos, like gold or below, your focus is just building up your foundation mechanics. So if you're gold below, just lock in Clove or lock in some type of simple duelist like ISO.
I think I saw OD recommend just lock in ISO, because it's just pure mechanics. Like you're shielding up and swinging people.
ISO is a really good recommendation. I will say Reyna's good as well.
You can also just live out, that anime kind of arc if you play ISO, protagonist of your main character of the story.
Yeah, some blue lock stuff right there. But I think after Plat, you should really start to decide on a role. At least start experimenting with everything. Because at the end of the day, like whatever you enjoy the most and whatever is more natural to you, you'll be able to push the limits of your character a little bit more.
Okay.
So that's why you'll see like an Alpha Hair really, really good on Sentinel, or Benji really good on Sentinel, and they're okay with, I guess, leaving their setup and take dry duels. When you traditionally think Senti is not going to be the role to carry a game, you can definitely carry a game on Senti. It's just not in your traditional run around deathmatch type of playstyle.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that we should have?
I don't think so. Maybe not to overthink it, just experiment, and you'll be fine testing some stuff.
Enjoy the journey and enjoy the rank journey. Thank you everyone for joining us this week. I hope this was interesting and I hope this was enlightening. Hopefully this is clarified which agent you should play instead of making it more confused. And if it is making it more confused, you can join Adam on his stream weekly, Monday to Friday, on YouTube and on Twitch. This isn't an advertisement because I'm not getting paid.
That's a good plug.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you're having a great week. Appreciate the support.
Thank you. Peace out.